This week on the podcast, we welcome founder and CEO of Crowd Health, Andy Schoonover. There's this part of me that I'm like, is it irresponsible to get rid of health insurance?
That's our number one piece
fear.
Pushback. And we're trying to make this so it's like, no, there's actually freedom in being uninsured. Because I just told you that some of the stats, 200,000 families with health insurance went bankrupt. 17 or 18% of claims last year by Obamacare plans were denied. So that's a 1 in 5 or 6 chance your claims are going to get denied. So I think there's this psyop that has happened over the last, 50 years that people are like, oh, I have to have health insurance. And oh my gosh, those people who are uninsured, what are they going to do? Right. And I was like, no, I'm looking at it as like, what are you all with insurance going to do? Like, you won't even go to the hospital because you're worried about your deductible.
Yeah.
Like, is that the way to live? Whereas Crowd Health, if you go to the hospital, you pay the first $500.
Yeah.
Anything above that, the community is going to help you out with.
This is Walk-Ins Welcome with Bridget Phetasy. I'm Bridget Phetasy, and you are welcome. You know the drill. Please subscribe, rate, comment, share, reach out, tell your friends, send smoke signals, whatever. We love your feedback and we want to hear from you. If you like our work and want to support us, the best way to do that is join PHETASY.com. You'll get access to behind-the-scenes content, outtakes, discounts on merch, and the ability to submit questions for some of our upcoming guests. Support your favorite scrappy little internet heroes at PHETASY.com. Walk-Ins Welcome is brought to you by Patriot Gold. Call 888-614-9238 for a free investor guide today. I'm with Andy Schoonover. Welcome to Walk-Ins Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Oh, I'm a big fan of what you're doing and and I really wanted to just talk to you about like your whole life story and how you ended up where you are. So tell people a little bit about what you're doing now, and then we'll kind of work our way back from there with Crowd Health.
I think health insurance is screwed up.
Really?
Yeah.
You don't
Shocking.
say.
I know it's shocking. We're sitting here and everybody just kind of went through their health insurance stuff, trying to pick what they want to do for this year. And it just sucks. Like you see it online and Twitter or whatever, like, I can't believe that I have to pay $36,000 before the insurance plan pays $1. And so like somebody's got to do this. Like somebody's got to figure out a way to build a way to pay for your health care without insurance.
Right.
And so that's in essence what we're doing is we're putting together some tools that allow people to pay for their health care without being required to have health insurance. So we say we're delightfully uninsured. We actually have t-shirts that say uninsured on the front. So we're owning them.
So how does this work? Where do you come from healthcare?
I had a healthcare company. This is my second healthcare company.
Okay.
After the first one, I was like, I'm never doing this again because healthcare just sucks for a bunch of different reasons.
Yeah.
But it's like, all right, here I am again. Something has to change.
Where are you from?
I'm from St. Louis originally.
Okay. Yeah. And then
was just back there. It was -6 degrees. So
wow.
Like, get me back in Texas.
Yeah. Even though
it's not much better
California,
here.
they're like suckers.
Yeah.
And then did you go to college? What did you get? Did you go to college?
Virginia.
Okay.
College of Virginia, University of Virginia.
And what did you get your degree in?
Doing finance. So I thought I was going to do finance. Thought I was going to do real estate. Worked for a hotel real estate company for a while, and then went out to Stanford for business school. Mm-hmm. Funny story. Have you ever seen that movie, The Social Network?
Yes.
Yeah. So there's a subplot in this around Mark Zuckerberg and Eduardo, who's a co-founder. They had to find $16,000 so they could move their friends from Boston to Silicon Valley.
Right.
And in that movie, they rented out a house, and the house they rented it out from was my house.
Oh, wow.
So between the first year and second year of business school, we all went and did our internships. And so we went on Craigslist of all things back in the day and found Mark Zuckerberg, who came by the house a couple times to take a look at it and paid us, I think it was $16,000 or $18,000 for the summer. I can't remember exactly. But that house is in the movie.
Oh, weird.
So it was pretty funny to see the movie, and that was us.
Oh, wow, that's
so
crazy.
They did not have a zip line from the chimney into the pool. That was a fabrication, but otherwise, that was the house.
So you were in the kind of Silicon Valley world.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was 2005, 2006.
Okay.
Which things were going crazy because, Facebook was starting, Google had started not too long, before that.
Those were like the golden.
It was the golden years of Silicon Valley. And so my classmates at Stanford went and they did Facebook and they went Google and all these high-tech startups. And my roommate and I were like, let's do something different. So we went out and bought a little company in, of all places, Dayton, Ohio. So I moved from Silicon Valley to Dayton, Ohio, and as you can probably imagine, everybody looked at me like I was nuts.
I like Ohio, though.
Yeah, I like Ohio. I met my wife in Ohio, so all good in Ohio. No hate to the Ohioans, but bought a little company and grew that over 7 years and sold it.
Okay.
And it was negative 12 degrees the day we sold the company, and that's where I was like, you know what? I'm gonna move down south to Texas.
Interesting.
So, yeah, moved down here and thought I was gonna play lots of golf and eat lots of tacos and all that kind of stuff. And because I had sold my company, I didn't have health insurance. So most of us get health insurance through our employer. So I went on Obamacare thinking that was my only option. And so I kind of joke, it worked until I had to use it. My little one, who's 1 at the time, was having recurring ear infections and needed tubes in her ears. She had a hole in her eardrum. So ear, nose, and throat doc was like, go get tubes in her ears. It'll correct it. So we went and got tubes in her ears. Got the bill. It was $8,000 for a 15-minute procedure. I was like, holy crap, $8,000 for 15 minutes? Like, that's nuts. And, and then I got a note later from the insurance company saying they weren't going to pay for it. It was medically unnecessary.
What did you do before in healthcare, before you?
Sure, yeah. We were monitoring blood pressure and blood sugars and weight and things like that for folks with chronic conditions at their home. So if you have diabetes and your blood sugar spike, we had a little device in your home that would tell us that your blood sugar spiked, and we had a call center of nurses.
Oh, cool.
You'd call and say, hey, John, your blood sugar's up. Let's talk about it. What did you eat? Did you take your meds? And we're trying to keep people from going into the hospital.
Right.
So health insurance plans, funny enough, I'm anti-health insurance now, but I was selling to them in the past. They were trying to keep people out of the hospital, so we were helping them do that.
Oh, wow. And so does that company still exist in some form?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was sold to a private equity firm, then the private equity firm sold it to a publicly traded company, and so now it's part of a publicly traded company.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
That sounds helpful, though. I mean...
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Funny enough, is like we bought the company, and have you ever seen the silly commercial, I've fallen and I can't get up?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we were a competitor to Life Alert. And so we went into this business, and sorry, we're getting to a little business 101 here, but we went into this business, and our average customer was 82.
Right.
And they had, a bunch of different conditions, 2.4 conditions, chronic conditions per person. So like what we were finding is that we were only getting involved when they were on the floor, like they were on the floor and they needed help. And so we said, okay, well, what if we put a Bluetooth module in these little devices, and we could start monitoring other stuff in their house, like blood pressure and weight and all that kind of stuff. So we kind of took a I fall and I can't get up company and turned it into more of a remote monitoring of chronic conditions type of company.
And so, are these people do they usually have like in-home assistants, or are they alone?
Some have in-home assistants, but most of them are alone. I mean, these are alone at 80. There's a lot of things that can go wrong there, especially when you have chronic conditions.
I mean, it's funny, before we started recording, we were talking about just in-laws that I have and health, and all of my parents are aging, and I don't know that I'm prepared for what is really required when somebody gets to be that age. And I was thinking, what is it like to be alone? I just don't know. And I've seen different levels of care at the end of your life. Right. I volunteered at places that were like not great, but kind of state funded, where people were put in for assisted livings, like 4 people in a room, and not the cleanest places. And then people who saved for retirement and had money and lived where they got like a glass of wine every night with dinner and it seemed very fancy. And I was like, I gotta actually consider retirement.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, you can end up in some destitute places.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think wouldn't all of us want to live well and then die quickly? Right?
Yeah.
Like, none of us want to die in a nursing home, or I don't care how nice the place is. Like, it's just not where we want to die. Like, I mean, I would like to treat my body in a way in my, 30s, 40s, and 50s, so that in my 70s, 80s, and 90s, like at some point, it's just like you're gone, right? It's, as opposed to having these chronic conditions, which 80% of the time, are because of lifestyle issues.
Really?
And so, I know that you kind of had talked about your in-laws, that they took great care of themselves, and stuff happens.
Yep.
Just happens. Stuff happens. My dad had a stroke, and he took pretty good care of himself, and just like stuff happens.
Yeah.
In those cases, you just kind of have to be like, man, like there's not a lot you can do about that.
Yeah.
But to the extent that we can keep chronic conditions from penetrating our bodies, through lifestyle choices, that's huge.
That's so, I mean, this is like the obesity epidemic in our country is so under, it's like we give it a lot of lip service. And I see the same thing with mental health. It's these two things you hear about constantly and yet seem to just continue to get worse. So I wonder, what's that disconnect? What do you think is the disconnect between we're talking a lot about this problem and it seems to be throwing money at this problem, products, trying to be creative, different things, and yet it still continues to get worse?
I think it's a 50-year trend for kind of relieving ourselves of personal agency or personal responsibility and saying, like, we're no longer responsible for what happens to us in our 70s, 80s, and 90s because the government's going to take care of us, or insurance is going to take care of us, or somebody else is going to take care of us. And I feel like, I've said this, on other podcasts, but I think what we're seeing is that the government, insurance companies are kind of like wedging themselves in between us and agency, personal responsibility. And therefore we don't even really think about it. We become, high tide preference. In essence, we are yearning for satisfaction now, as opposed to thinking about how the instant gratification is going to impact our lives in 30, 40, or 50 years. We're just not built that way anymore. Where I feel like the boomers were actually built that way a little bit more than we are, currently. Or maybe it's a generation before that.
Yeah, the boomers seem like they're very like F it. They've seen very kind of live and let live. I don't know. They're the
what is the one beyond that?
The greatest generation.
The greatest generation.
Or I guess there's the silent generation is above the greatest. Are they after the greatest generation? When was the silent generation? There's another little like micro generation, the silent generation. I think they're right above the boomers.
Okay.
So I think technically, like people are like, can we just get, boomers out of the White House? I'm like, I don't even think Biden is a boomer. I think technically he's like the silent generation, and then the greatest generation.
Yeah. Well, there's clearly been a trend towards instant gratification over the generations.
Oh, definitely.
And that instant gratification comes with long-term consequences, and we just don't want to think about the long-term consequences, right?
Yeah, I mean, I wonder too how much of it is just like the tech-oriented society that we live in. It makes everything more and more convenient. Yeah. Things are just. We were talking about this before we started recording, just how in the 1860s you had some idea of how to do basic just life skills, like start a fire. Everyone knew how to do this. Yeah. And now that's something you would go learn at like a fancy, 3-day training for how to handle firearms and be a survival training or something. And this was just, kids knew how to do it, everybody. So we do, it does seem like we've lost something. I've been reading my grandfather's letters from World War II that he sent, and just the overall tone is so remarkable to me, and how different this guy was on a
a carrier out of the Pacific, and he was in the entire war. He was there from beginning to end. And he would say things in the letters like, I don't want anybody to think I'm complaining. And this guy just got blown off a like aircraft carrier, and he's feeling self-conscious because he maybe mentioned that it's been challenging.
The softening of the public due to all the conveniences in life. Like, we have little issues that, you know, everybody's got to emotionally respond to. I mean, my wife said something to me the other day that I thought was really, you know, insightful. It was like, we don't have to emotionally respond to everything.
Yeah.
Right. And so many people within our current society, because I think we haven't had to overcome a lot. I mean, they emotionally respond to everything. Like, it's a triggering, you know, it's a trigger. Everything's a trigger.
Right.
You know, it's like, how do you live the life of being triggered over and over and over again, as opposed to making a choice like, I am not going to emotionally respond to this.
Yeah.
You know, and so I think it's social media. I think it's lack of, you know, a need for perseverance. Like, we just don't have that skill a whole lot anymore. You know, I'm generalizing a little bit, but I think for the majority of the American public, like, perseverance is not that difficult a thing. We have to persevere through, like, being bored after, you know, scrolling through Instagram for 3 hours.
Yeah, but even being bored is something that we're losing. You know, there's something about, I was talking to Lenore Skenazy, and she talks about the kind of free range children movement.
Yeah.
And we've been watching this she recommended this documentary called Becoming You. It's on Apple Plus. My daughter is now obsessed with it because it's all babies. So she'll just be like, babies, and she wants to watch it. But it's all about, it's beautifully shot. It takes place all over the world, and it follows 100 children through the first 5 years of their life. And it's different cultures in like Mongolian, these kind of kids that are in they live on stilts, and the first errand in Japan where they send the 3-year-old out by themselves to do an errand. And in the West, we are a little bit, you know, bubble wrapped, I think.
Yeah.
And I don't actually know how you get that kind of level of freedom and just agency and I don't even know how you go back, because in our society you'll be arrested.
Yeah.
You know, they'll call like Child and Family Services on you.
That's probably right.
If you're like, hey, go get the mail, little 3-year-old, you know, it's right around the corner, so your neighbor sees. And there are multiple stories of this happening. So
yeah, for sure.
I'm not sure. And I think it does make kids, you know, we're seeing this kind of crisis with teens right now and the younger generation. It does make them feel insecure and kind of incapable of not only managing their emotions, but kids don't want to drive anymore. I was like, get me behind the wheel of a car.
16, day of.
And I failed my first time because it was snowing.
I failed the written test.
Oh, I failed the driving test because it snowed. It was in Minnesota. It snowed the night before, and I didn't see the sign. It was partially covered that it was a one-way, so I turned too far. I still remember it. This is how traumatizing it was. And then I went the next day and got it. But I was so ready to drive and be free and have that just like independence.
Yeah.
Gold has soared past $2,000 an ounce, guys. Wars in Israel and Ukraine and rate cuts on the table are fueling gold's meteoric rise. There's a direct correlation to the national debt and price of gold. In 2020, the U.S. debt was $23 trillion and gold was $1,500 an ounce. In 2023, the debt is $33 trillion, numbers you cannot even get your mind around, and gold is over $2,000 an ounce. Donald Trump warned the U.S. dollar no longer being the world standard will be our greatest defeat in 200 years. Call the proud Americans of the Patriot Gold Group today before it's too late. Mention Bridget Phetasy, and you'll always get best-in-class service from Patriots Protecting Patriots. Patriot Gold Group has a no-fee-for-life IRA where your IRA or 401k can be in physical gold and silver, and you may be eligible for the no-fee-for-life IRA on qualifying rollovers. Call 888-614-9238 for a free investor guide today. Patriot Gold Group is Consumer Affairs top-rated gold IRA dealer 7 years in a row. Call 888-614-9238. Mention Bridget Phetasy.
I feel like, too, like you mentioned, the government and insurance and all these things are trying to wedge themselves. There is another thing that I've noticed is just the constant appeal to authority. You know, somebody's always like, I see it's a bipartisan, it seems like, come fix my problems. Someone's gonna come fix the issues that we have instead of, and kids do it too. You know, they're always like, when I come mediate this argument or whatever.
Yeah.
And when I was growing up, it was very much like, that's a kid problem. I must have heard that 100 million times when I was a kid.
Yeah. I tell my daughters, like, you two figure it out. Like, mom and dad do not need to get in the middle of this. You need to learn the skill of resolving conflict.
Yeah.
Even though you're only 5 and 7.
Yeah.
But you can start now. Start now. Yeah. I mean, I think that the other thing too is, I feel like we've lost the sense of generosity, which I think is such a core to who we are as human beings. But like, if you think back in the 70s and the 80s, if somebody moves next to you, I remember when I was growing up, we'd bring people cookies or bring them a gift or whatever it is. And we don't do that anymore.
I will say, we moved to Texas in my suburb, and our next door neighbors brought us
Texan
brisket.
Values, I love it.
Brought us brisket. Our other neighbors brought us it was such a. It's so funny that you say this, actually, because I'm so destroyed by years of living in Los Angeles.
I was gonna say, would they have done it in LA?
No, nobody did that in LA. But not only that, it's interesting that in such a kind of, I joke and call it California, but it is a very collective, constantly. It's just a different vibe in California where there's much more big government. They're inserting themselves in kind of everything, and it weirdly seems like it makes people. I mean, Los Angeles is just a selfish city in general, but there is that sense that it's every man for themselves, and you're trying to kind of take what's yours and get in line, and everywhere you go is a battle. And here I didn't feel that way at all. And we had a neighbor with this recent cold spell who gave us covers for our faucets and just said, "You're from California, you might not know these help." And it was really kind of him, and I was like, what's he up to?
Yeah. It's interesting to me where you're in LA, in California, or you said California, which is supposed to be this, like, we're doing things for the collective, we're doing things for the common good, yet California, you just said, seemed to be a lot more selfish.
Yeah.
Like, it's about me, it's about what's in it for me, which seems like an interesting dynamic, whereas you come to the United States, United States of Texas,
real America,
where we're all about independence, agency, personal responsibility. Yet when you came and moved, it was about like, oh, we want to, say hi to Bridget. I'm gonna bring you brisket. I'm gonna welcome you. It's an interesting thing where if you have agency, if you have personal responsibility, I do think there's something there about you actually wanting to be more generous to other people, because it's not really all about you.
Yeah.
Right? There's a weird dynamic there that I don't fully understand, but it almost seems contrarian to what they're trying to accomplish.
Well, I've been thinking a lot about this, and it's brand new thoughts, and I don't really know enough about communism, true communism, which has apparently never been tried. But I was married, and my first husband was from Belarus, and it was interesting to see just how shady, just living under that kind of system. Mm-hmm. He was always looking for loopholes and always looking for ways to get around the system, and always kind of suspicious of his neighbors. So I think when collectivism, or when this idea of forced, the collective is imposed from the top down,
Yeah.
it actually seems to make people more selfish because they're not and distrusting and questioning the motives of why people are doing something that they might be doing just out of goodwill. And this is only, again, something I'm just thinking about and noticing, because here where it's not, people during the freeze and the little Facebook group in my community were like, we have a fireplace. If you guys lose power and you have kids and you need to stay warm, you're welcome to come over. If anybody need anything, they were letting everybody know the condition of the roads. It was, in LA, it was everybody getting mad at each other about like throwing dog poop in someone else's garbage. That was always like the big debate. In the
Jeez.
Yeah, just such a strange, weird first world debate to have, but it was always raging, and it seemed there wasn't that kind of generosity of spirit, and it also, I think, fuels more of it. So because people did that for us, now we've had new neighbors, and I'm more inclined to go do something for them. I made cookies for everybody around Christmas. So like, it just makes you want to be a good neighbor and a helpful, competent person. And so, there's so much, and I do think in the healthcare industry in general, and like we were talking about mental health and obesity and these things that seem to be getting worse, I'm not sure how they get better if you aren't really inspiring people to empower themselves. I mean, I know you're into Bitcoin as well, which seems like another way from what I learned doing the whole series that I did where we first met.
That's fun.
Yeah. I really learned how the thing that struck me the most was just how empowering it can be, something like that. I mean, I'm still not exactly sure what happens if the grid goes down, but I think we're all aft if that happens.
I was going to say we're all screwed if the grid goes down. Because how much money do you hold in your wallet now?
Yeah.
Like, I think I have $4 in my wallet.
Yeah.
Like, if the grid goes down and I have no access to my dollars in the bank, we're all toast.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think that's one of those almost red herrings that people, throw out there.
You're like stockpiling gold bars on one hand and Bitcoin.
And trading, 10-pound gold bars.
You're just going to be biting off pieces of silver.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just, again, since the 70s, there's this website. Have you ever seen this? It's like WTF happened in 1972 or something like that.
Oh, I've heard. I feel like I recently just heard that.
Yeah, and it's just a page of graphs that basically showed all of these big things happening in the United States culture in 1972. So obesity, from 1972 to today has like tripled.
Oh,
and
okay.
It was like flat, and then in the early 1970s it goes, skyrockets. Diabetes went from 1% of the population in 1972. Type 2 diabetes was almost unheard of in the 1970s to 10% of the population now, right?
Wow.
And so it has 10x, over the last 50 years.
Yeah.
And a lot of things happened in the 1970s that started changing the way that we as culture, just act.
Right.
The monetary folks, the Bitcoin folks would say, well, in the 1970s, we depegged from gold, which basically allowed the government to print as much money as they want. Inflation took off. Early 1970s, insurance, as it currently is, how we currently use it, was codified in the HMO Act of 1973, I think.
Was this who was president then? Reagan?
Carter? No, Carter was 76 to 80. It was Nixon.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Okay. 72.
Yeah. And so all these things happened in the 1970s that it seemed to, in almost any facet of life, started tearing down the U.S. culture. And so go and check out that website. It's WTF 1970 something. You can find it if you Google it.
I feel like I was seeing something too recently that was like blaming Reagan for something Reaganomics or like trickle down economics or something like that, where it was like what happened I'm not sure though. I don't remember.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at the data, it definitely started in the 70s.
Okay.
Before Reagan.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. But I think kind of going back to the generosity component is like, I feel good when I can be generous to somebody under my own act, not forced, right? You know, a lot of liberals especially say, oh, well, you have to be generous through taxes. Well, that's forced generosity, right? And it's going to the government who's going to screw it up and is going to use my money in bad ways, and it's not actually going to solve the problem in which they think.
And there's, again, very little transparency.
Right. Health insurance is the same way, where we give it to a big corporation, you know, they get to figure out how to divvy it up, and a lot of people are left out. And we were talking about beforehand, 200,000 people went bankrupt last year due to a medical expense, even though they had health insurance. Like, and so this is the craziness that we're living in. And we thought, was like, hey, what if I could actually send money to Bridget directly for her help? Right. And so I know that my money is going to somebody who needs help. And that totally changes the way that people act, because you're no longer, you know, if somebody gets hurt, what do you want to do? You think you're getting screwed by United Healthcare or Aetna or Cigna or whoever, right? So you try to extract as much value out of that system as possible. Yeah. Whereas if you're in a community with other people, I'm screwing Bridget and Bridget's screwing the next guy, right? If we try to, you know, act in a way that's counter to what's going on in that community. Now that sounds communal, right? But it is a community of people who are acting personally responsible. I am personally responsible for my own healthcare bills, and people who get together in a community who are personally responsible. The Bitcoin community is one of them. That's a kick-ass community. Yeah. Like, they can get stuff done. Yeah. Right. Those people revolutionize, you know, the world in a lot of ways. So, and we need communities like that to really start revolutions. That's what we're trying to do in healthcare.
Yeah, it's something has to be done. I don't know how you fix it. Do you see something like crowd health going? How do you scale it? Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, we've got 7,000 people have signed up to date. The question mark is like, can you get to 1 million or 2 million or 3 million? And in fact, it scales. The bigger it gets, the more impactful it can be. Right. And so we actually get a network effect where, you know, here's one cool example of, I live in 78746 here in Austin. And we had a member who also lived in 78746 and reached out to us like, man, I really need a great pediatrician in 78746, right? And so what we do is we text everybody in 78746. We're like, hey, does anybody know a great pediatrician in 78746? And I was so excited because I was like, oh man, we got this great pediatrician. My girls love them. You know, this is what they're good at. This is what they're bad at. And so now I can generously, you know, share information with other people. Yeah. And now they have that information and they can go and get a great pediatrician, but it's from somebody else in your community. It's not somebody on Google who you don't know from Adam, right? Right. And then once we have that data, we put that into our database so that if the next person in 78746 was looking for a pediatrician, we say, oh, Andy, you know, has this great, and it's a 5-star pediatrician. You should go there. So we start sharing that type of information. And as that grows, more information gets into that database, more reviews get in there. And so now you can actually figure out who actually is a good doctor in Austin or Georgetown or LA or wherever you live. And so that magnifies the impact in the community. So do you have this on top of insurance?
80% of our people don't.
Okay, so they don't have insurance.
So they're truly uninsured.
Okay.
Which scares a lot of people. But the freedom that you have from not having insurance, you can go to anybody. Yeah. Right? Like the first thing my wife always asked me when we changed insurance back in the day was like, you know, is my OBGYN in? And is our pediatrician in? And is this like in network, out of network? You get rid of that. You can go to whoever you want. Naturopathic, you know, holistic. You know, your insurance plan is not saying, oh, you can't go to that person. No. It's like, no, go to whoever you want.
I'm seeing this with mental health too. My husband is a therapist, and he has clients, and then the new year rolled around, and now they need their copay. Like, they have to meet their deductible before they can get the copay rates for their mental health, which seems crazy to me. I'm like, how does that have anything to do with your deductible? That's bananas, but that's just what it is.
Just is the way it is.
Yeah, that doesn't seem...
It's been codified in law, basically, that health insurance plans have to do this. And again, it's government coming in kind of under this guise of, we're here to protect you, public, but, we're here to protect you as also, in many cases, a control mechanism.
Yeah.
Which ultimately leads, from my perspective, to tyranny. And so we're trying to take government, insurance plans, everything out, right? And now it's between you and your doctor, which I think is really important.
I wish something like this existed when I was waiting tables, because there's I didn't want to bankrupt my family, so I always paid. I've been freelance and a waitress since I was in my 20s. I didn't take a traditional path. I've never worked had a quote unquote real job where you get benefits. And so I've always paid for private insurance. And after my rent, it was always my second biggest expense. And usually after Obamacare, it just kept going up and up and up. And I didn't need it. I was in my 20s and in such good health, but I paid $300 a month or something crazy like that to basically go get a physical once a year for many, many years. And when you're waiting tables, things are kind of changing in that industry, but not really. You're not insured by unless you maybe work for a huge corporation, but I worked for a lot of mom and pops, and you're not getting health care.
The healthy subsidizes the unhealthy.
Yeah.
In our system currently.
Yeah.
Right. And like I said, and most of the time it's unhealthy because of lifestyle choices. And in some cases it's not. In those cases, they need some help. But it's, in essence, our system is built on the healthy subsidizing the unhealthy.
Yeah.
Which therefore there's no real incentive to stay healthy, no monetary incentive, to stay healthy.
Yeah.
And so that's the challenge that we have in our current.
And it's like, I see people who are on kind of the state insurances because they're single moms or whatever, and they can just indulge every fear that they have about their health, and I can't afford to do that. Right. It would cost me money if I have to really be in pain, and even then people will be like, I don't know if
I'll let you go.
I'm still mad. When I first moved here, I think it was just stress from moving. I had a 1-year-old. It was nuts. And then I got thrown into Texas healthcare, which is not great. I will say in California, I had a PPO, and I could have an individual PPO in California, and in Texas, you really can't.
No PPO.
So then I got thrown into the HMO, and I was like, oh my God, this is how people live? This is insane. You have to wait for permission from they're like, well, we can't refer you to a specialist until you get a referral from your... I was like, this is bananas. I don't know.
It needs to be disrupted.
It's insane.
It needs to be disrupted.
It is insane. And
no networks with Crowd Health. Go to whoever you want.
Yeah, that's
super easy. And the other thing too is, look, if you are hurt or you feel something I get it. We're stressed. So things are going on. I'll give you a perfect example where my I think she was probably 3 at the time. 3-year-old was bouncing on the bed and fell off, right? Whacked her head and started talking gibber.
Yeah.
And so we were like, okay, let's go to the hospital, right? We're like, oh my gosh, but if we go to the hospital, then it's a lot of money and all these kinds of things. Well, we used a virtual urgent care, and we got on the phone with a doc. It was free. It was a part of Crowd Health. Got on with the doc. We talked to her for, we got, I think, on in 2 minutes, talked to her for 5 minutes. It was like, ask her these 5 questions every 15 minutes. If she can answer them, don't take her to the hospital. If she can't answer them, take her to the hospital. If she can't answer them, don't take her to the hospital. Right? And so super cheap.
Right.
Right. And that is cost you nothing as a Crowd Health member, but got your, symptoms resolved. And we never had to take her to a hospital because she just had a little, concussion.
Right.
And so there's new ways that we can go and get care that if we don't have health insurance and don't have to rely upon a health insurance company being like, thumbs up, it's actually way cheaper to do things outside of health insurance, because these doctors, they don't have to do all these permissions and paperwork and administration and things like that. Doctors spend between a day and a day and a half every week dealing with health insurance plans.
Wow. Yeah. Well, a lot of doctors just don't take it anymore. That's what I kept seeing.
They don't take it.
Yeah, more and more. The higher up they went, they had a kind of, they'd get to a certain point in their medical career, and they just stopped taking health insurance. This happened with an eye doctor I saw. It happened with, and now you're just in that kind of boutique world where it's generally for the rich. I know people who don't even. Can you explain the difference between an HMO and a PPO for people who don't know, or do?
I mean, it's somewhat complex. An HMO is a very defined set of places that you can go, and you need permissions. Basically, it's a permission-based system where you have to start always with your primary care doctor, and your primary care
Why
doctor
did it
has to.
split?
I don't know the details of it back in the day. I'm so anti-network that I'm like, let's get rid of the networks, altogether. And oftentimes the HMOs are in a closed system. So, for example, in Austin, we have two big health systems, which is St. David's and Ascension. And so oftentimes you have to stay within that system.
Right.
You can't go to an outside system. So if you want to go to a doctor that may not be in that system, you can't do that unless you want to pay, out of pocket for that.
Right.
So, it's tons of limitations on that.
Yeah.
I mean, the other crazy thing with that is you may go to a hospital that is in network, but there are doctors there that are out of network.
Right.
And so if you see a doctor or a service provider that's out of network, that means that doesn't actually apply to your deductible, your in-network deductible.
Right.
And a lot of times you could be unconscious. Like, you go to the ER and you're unconscious or whatever. Like, you can't ask the doctor if you're in network or out of network. Like, it just doesn't happen. That is the craziness of our system.
It's so crazy.
And so I say to people, I was like, look, you work for whoever pays you. Okay? So who pays the doctors? Insurance companies.
Right.
So doctors work for insurance companies.
Right.
They don't work for us. They work for insurance companies. Now, what if I went to the doctor and I said, hey, I'm going to pay you myself, right? Now the doctor works for me.
Yeah.
And the dynamic totally changes.
Yeah.
Right. So no longer do I have to go to that doctor because he's in my network and it's my only choice. Right. Now I'm going to the doctor because it's my choice. Right. And so that becomes a consumerism based, system.
And you can negotiate. People don't understand that you can negotiate when you come in with cash and say, I don't have insurance. What's the actual rate for this stuff?
Yeah.
But it's because it seems like you'll get charged like $1,000 for a Q-tip, when you look at the bills, you're like, what is this? You gave me a Band-Aid and it was $500.
Yeah. I had a $3, I was in the ER, unfortunately, it's about a couple months ago, everything's fine, but there was a $3 bag of basically salt water, that they stuck into my arm.
Right.
It's just a bag of salt water going through a tube into my arm, and $3 I could buy it online. And they charged me $5,400 for it over a 24-hour period.
It's so crazy.
I'm like, what the heck?
No, it is not good. It's not fair to people either. You have no idea. And then you have people literally dying because they would rather, you see this a lot actually with like ectopic pregnancies, which are still very deadly, the tubal pregnancies, but people will have a pain in their side. They won't know they're pregnant. They'll think it's just gas, or they'll think it's, and they might not have insurance, or they'll have insurance. It doesn't even really matter. And they'll wait, and then it'll be catastrophic and you die.
Yeah.
Because you're just that mentality of like, how bad does it have to be before I go in? And even when you have health insurance, it seems like no matter what happens, people are using GoFundMe. Even people, I have friends who are in the unions, like SAG and AFTRA, and because of the strike, they weren't getting their health care. They had a family member who ended up getting a brain tumor, and because of the strike, they couldn't get it was insane, and their GoFundMe was for like $200,000.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Well, I mean, I think that and this is the danger of health insurance from my perspective is if you have one of these Obamacare plans, you may not be paying a ton on a per monthly basis, but like a lot of those are $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 deductibles.
Right.
And so what you just described was I have a little pain. I'm not going to go take care of it because if I go take care of it, this could cost me thousands of dollars.
Right.
Like insurance doesn't pay for it until you go above the deductible. And so that's what's putting people into bankruptcy is people are having these big issues. They don't have enough cash in the bank to pay for their deductible. And therefore, what are they going to do? Like the hospital oftentimes forces them into bankruptcy. So you have health insurance. You have a medical issue. You still go into bankruptcy.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And that's the craziness of our current system. I saw somebody online the other day where I think they had to pay $30,000 before the insurance plan paid $1. And at that point, you're like, why the hell would you even get insurance? Like, that's crazy.
It's not even about the deductible because part of that will be siphoned off of specific things. But then if you go into the emergency room and you get admitted, now we're talking about percentages.
Yeah.
And so that's where you really get screwed because it's like, oh, aside from your deductible, it's also
co-insurance. So above your deductible, then you have to pay
10%.
10, 20, 30, sometimes 50% of anything above that to a new level. And you're like,
yeah. So it's not people will. And if you don't really look into these things and pay that much attention to them, you'll be like, oh, my deductible is $8,000. Yeah, well, that's not if you get admitted and you're in the hospital and now you're looking at 20% of whatever your hospital stay is.
Right, exactly.
Or that's not imaging, which isn't included in your deductible for some weird reason. It's like,
or the imaging center is out of network, so that doesn't count in your deductible for this.
It makes me crazy too that politicians don't genuinely try and solve this problem.
Yeah,
and
it's not shocking though, is it?
I mean,
health insurance, pharma.
Did they get
hospitals?
Yeah,
they're the top lobbyists.
Yeah,
they go and they say.
There must be money in it.
Well, look at us. We're only making 4% margins, and they're oftentimes the largest employers in these towns, right? So they've got a lot of sway in local government. They got a lot of sway in big government. Look at this whole COVID thing, right? Back in the day, all the hospitals were going and saying, "Look at us, like we're the safety net. Like look at all that. We're totally packed with COVID people. They're all going to die if hospitals are around." So they play this victim thing, yet when somebody comes in and needs a bag of saline solution, salt water, they charge $5,400. And they're like, well, that's just how much, it is. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's the same thing that happens in the military industrial complex where, these are all basically cost plus situations. In essence, what these military folks do is they say, oh, it cost us $100. And so we're going to charge the government $110.
Right.
Well, how do I get more money? Well, next year it's going to cost me $125. And so government, you have to give me, 10% on top of that. So you actually have an incentive for costs to go up. And that's why our military, I saw something on a podcast where a rocket-fired grenade in the United States is $4,000.
Mm-hmm.
Russia, they do the same rocket-fired propelled grenade, whatever, for $400. Mm-hmm. So why is it 10 times more expensive in the United States? It's the same thing with healthcare. It's 10 times more expensive in the United States because you're building all of this administrative, bureaucratic BS that you get to then charge to, the American people, and your costs just go up. It's just a ridiculous system that in the heads of politicians, they think this is a really good idea. But in reality, it creates so many perverse incentives
Right.
that it almost forces costs to go up significantly faster than inflation.
Well, that's like when you look at the public school budgets, it's all
Totally.
administration.
Yeah.
It's not, because I'm like, why are there teachers always begging for supplies? And every year you pay more taxes to the schools.
no sense.
And it's because and then you look at the administration costs, and it's like the thing that's increased the most over it, not teacher pay, not supplies, not anything. It all goes to administrators.
Have you seen the graph, and this is going around social media, where it's like inflation for goods over the last 20 years? And it's basically showing a bunch of different types of goods what the inflation is. And I think the number one was like hospital services. The number two was secondary education. It's like all the things that were way above inflation, the government was really, really involved in.
Right.
The bottom was like TVs, like cell phones,
right?
Like all these things where we actually have to go and make a decision with our own money. We actually have to pay for something as opposed to the government paying it for us. Right. Because in essence, what happens is if we don't have to pay for it, we're going to want as much of it as possible. Whereas if we have to pay for it, we actually have to govern ourselves and how much we spend, and those prices tend to go down. That's capitalism. Right?
Yeah.
So whenever the government gets involved in these things, military, education, healthcare, we pay for way more than we should.
Homelessness. I mean, you look at the numbers in California for what one little built like room costs. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars for someone to get someone off the street. It's insane, and it seems like it's just a lot of people pulling money out of pockets wherever they can, and none of the problems get solved.
Yeah.
And this is the cycle we're in so many things in the United States right now. And I think the average person is immensely frustrated with feeling like all the problems are just getting worse, even though we keep throwing money at them. It's like a trust fund kid.
It is.
America is a trust fund.
We're a trust fund. The trust fund baby.
Yeah.
That unfortunately can just keep printing money to put into that trust fund, and it never ends. And
there's a very big safety net that.
And so the Bitcoiners, which is kind of my world, think that it's got to come to an end.
Right.
Because every currency in the history of man has come to an end.
Right.
And usually it's about 50 years after they depeg from the underlying commodity. So
here we are.
Here we are.
Yeah.
Here we are 50 years after we depegged from gold, and we're running $1 trillion deficits. There's no way to bring that back. I don't see any possible way the government can go back into surpluses.
Right.
We've given away so much. Once you give something away, you can't take it back. It's very, very difficult. And so Bitcoiners are looking at this and saying the dollar will fail at some point. And so what happens then?
Right. What does happen then? I mean, is this why there's this movement of you will own nothing and you will live in, pods? And are they seeing the writing on the wall that
why are these underground bunkers being done? We kind of were joking about this, beforehand, but what do we do in the event of civil war? Can we actually function within that? But I think there's something significant like that could potentially happen if the dollar fails.
Right.
I mean, we're already hearing about the Saudis and the Chinese and things like that, transacting in yuan, and other countries are starting to do that too, because they see the downfall of the U.S. dollar.
Right.
It cannot go on forever.
Sometime in the early 80s, REO Speedwagon's airplane made an unannounced, middle-of-the-night landing.
This is my friend Kyle MacLachlan, the star of Twin Peaks. And he's telling me about how he discovered a real-life Twin Peaks in rural North Carolina, not far from where he filmed Blue Velvet.
What was on the plane was copious amounts of drugs coming in from South America. Supposedly, Pablo Escobar went looking for other spots, quiet, out-of-the-way places to bring in his cocaine.
My name is Joshua Davis, and I'm an investigative reporter. Kyle and I talk all the time about the strange things we come across, but nothing was quite as strange as what we found in Varnamtown, North Carolina.
There's crooked cops, brother against brother. Everyone's got a story to tell, but does the truth even exist? Welcome to Varnum Town.
Varnum Town is available wherever you listen to podcasts.
So,
which is kind of scary.
yeah, that seems like a...
Live in Texas, right, where your people here are well armed. If you want to be one place, it's gonna be Texas.
Yeah, I think that, or Idaho.
Idaho, there you go.
Yeah, there are a couple of places. Any really in the, I think the Midwest in general is pretty. They're still kind of like survival people.
Yeah,
they know how to farm.
That's my crew, Midwest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. And I see like a big turning back to that. I actually am seeing more and more people. One of the things I want to do even here is try and find some neighbors or people who are interested in getting, because like the cost of meat is so insane.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, you can all just go in on a cow together.
Totally.
And divvy it up and split up the meat and there you go. And I know somebody, I think it was the guy who helped me with my mortgage. He and his neighbors out in like Dripping, they do something like that. And I see people more and more. There's like, it feels very Instagram-y, but you see the kind of homesteading, people learning how to bake bread again and can, and there's like all this content that people are returning to, teaching themselves those skills.
I see a lot of it.
Yeah.
I see a lot of that happening.
Yeah. So. And again, bipartisan, not just, usually it's kind of traditionally right-wing people. And this seems to be like, I'm seeing, like Gen Z, like, I don't know if they're apolitical or what, but it's surprising to me to see like young people really getting on board with this.
Yeah, I agree with you.
But that is promising. Maybe people are starting to, because one of the words for this year that some words just kind of come to my head, and it always kind of sets a tone for the year. And sanity, levity, clarity, and the other one that I just keep hearing is competent. How can I make myself more competent and self-reliant, and what skills can I learn? New skills. I can't even sew a button on a shirt. I mean, I'm sure I could figure it out, but how do things like that, where it's just, what can I teach myself that would be useful?
Yeah. Because
I feel very useless.
I hear you. My wife, funny enough, who's 40, just took up sewing.
Yeah.
I
might do that.
Every day is there for an hour and does sewing, and that's what she really, enjoys doing. And, so from what I've heard is there is a group of people that are getting back to sewing, which is something that my mom and my grandmother used to do. My mom's in her 80s and my grandmother's passed away, but that has now been something that a lot of, people in their 40s are taking on now as well.
Yeah.
And I think it's that kind of desire to get back to competence. I love that word. And a little bit of like a localization.
Yes.
Like a little bit of like, we're going to have to rely upon ourselves and our little community here to get through this. There's a big movement going on with, kind of being able to know your local rancher or your local farmer and getting your food from a local place. So in case of disruption of, larger systems, which if the dollar will fail, that probably will happen, you actually have now a local person from which you can get your milk and your meat and your vegetables or whatever you eat. So I think there's a kind of localization, which I think is incredibly powerful.
Yeah. I live in a burb, and it's very much a planned burb, which I never ever thought I would see the day that I did. But there's an empty lot right next to me, and I'm like, all I want to do is buy this lot and turn it into a community garden.
Yeah.
And I know like HOA would never allow it. There'd be no point for any of the developers to do something like this, but that's my dream for that empty lot.
And you eat, real food, like out of the ground or meat, that's raised right there. And in essence, that will lead to healthier people, healthier lifestyles. So it may require that, full circle of like, no, we're going to have to get back to localization and get rid of all this processed crap that in essence is taking our society down a hellhole, I think, of obesity and chronic illnesses and all those kinds of things. And so maybe it's a forced, cycle here that we're going through, and probably a healthy one.
Yeah. So how do you see crowd health kind of, what is your target kind of demographic, I guess? Who's the person that needs this? Because I know for me, it would be like, there's this part of me that I'm like, is it irresponsible to get rid of health insurance?
Yeah.
That's
our number one piece
fear.
Pushback. And we're trying to make this so it's like, no, there's actually freedom in being uninsured. Because I just told you that some of the stats, 200,000 families with health insurance went bankrupt. I think it was 17 or 18% of claims last year by Obamacare plans were denied. So that's a 1 in 5 or 6, chance that your claims are going to get denied. So I think there's this psyop that has happened over the last, 50 years that people are like, oh, I have to have health insurance. And oh my gosh, those people who are uninsured, what are they going to do? Right. And I was like, no, I'm looking at it as like, what are you all with insurance going to do? Like, you won't even go to the hospital because you're worried about your deductible.
Yeah.
Like, is that the way to live? Whereas crowd health, if you go to the hospital, you pay the first $500.
Yeah.
Anything above that, the community is going to help you out with.
Right.
And so people are much more likely to go to the hospital and do this. Really quick story is a guy had kidney stones, and he's like, do I just fight it out here or do I go to the hospital? He's like, I'll go to the hospital. Went to the hospital, got the kidney stones figured out. They did some imaging. They're like, dude, you got something in your colon. So we went and got a colonoscopy. He's got stage 2 colon cancer.
Oh, no.
Which he had surgery on, and he's fine now. But for those who know colon cancer, once you get into the stage 3 level, like that's most of the time taking you out, or having a severe impact to your life.
Yeah.
Right? And so I kind of joke is like, this is the only guy on the planet who's like super excited about kidney stones, right? Because the kidney stones in essence saved his life.
Right.
And so he made the decision to go to the hospital because he had to go up with $500. Whereas if he had health insurance, he'd have to come up with $10,000 or $15,000. Right. I don't think that is a life of freedom.
Yeah.
Where you can't actually use it because you're afraid of how much it's going to cost you.
No, it's everybody lives in this fear. I don't know, unless you're wealthy, you're living in constant fear of something like that happening.
And so that seems more scary to me than not having health insurance, but having a community of people who have raised their hand and be like, hey, Bridget, if you get hurt, injured, sick, we're there for you.
So how does it work exactly?
Yeah. So if somebody in the community gets hurt, we'll just say...
but wait, you sign up and then you pay what?
So for a single person, it's like $175, $180 a month.
And for like a family?
Somewhere around $500 to $700, depending upon how many people you have in your family.
And you pay that every month?
Every month. So
and where does it go?
It goes to another person in the community. So every month, a family of 4, let's just say, would send Crowd Health $200, and that's just to pay our bills, like to make everything work. And then they would give $400 to somebody in the community who needs help.
Okay.
So we had a woman in a 19-year-old in Tennessee, got her fingers cut off in a boating accident over the summer, and Abby is her name. And we said, hey, people, Abby needs help. Would you help Abby? And so they say, yes, I'll help Abby. And if they say yes, then their $400 goes from their account to Abby's account. And we basically have like a little Venmo wallet in essence. So, you get all these people sending Abby money. We know who sends the money. And Abby then has enough money in her little health wallet to then go and pay for her surgeries and follow-ups and all these kinds of things.
Okay.
We had a woman who had a miscarriage, and so we sent it out to a bunch of people, and we said, "Hey, this woman has a miscarriage. There is, expenses associated with this." We had people being like, "I know what that's like, right? Can I send that woman more? Because I've been there. I've lived this, right? Like, you would never call United Healthcare and be like, can I give you more this month?
Right.
But since it's human to human, like there is just a an emotional response to being able to help Abby because her fingers got cut off.
Do you have to think about it every month? Like, do you have to kind of...
If you don't want to, you can automate it. You can set it on auto approve.
And it will just go where it needs to go?
Yeah, it's like, hey, you just tell me where I need to send it, and I'll send it. Right?
Okay.
And it's just auto.
And does it always... What if nobody needs anything? Or does someone always
Then we don't
need
ask
something?
you for it.
Oh.
So on a family of 4, the max we're going to ask is $400. This month, for example, we only asked for $300 because the bills were so low that family got to keep that extra $100 this month.
Okay.
They can do whatever they want with it.
Got it.
Right. So it changes from month to month, but we say it's maximum of $400.
And then how do you know what the bills are? So they come to you guys with the bills, and you negotiate on behalf of? Oh, okay.
Yeah. So if let's say you go to the hospital, you start getting bills in the mail, which everybody hates.
Yeah.
It's like, just take a picture of the bill. That sends it to us. We take a look at it. We make sure the bill is, fair. And if it's not, then we'll negotiate with the hospital on your behalf. We'll come back to you. And most of the time we get 60 or 70% off.
Wow.
We'll come back to you and say, hey, Bridget, your $20,000 bill is now $5,000. Can we go send that $5,000 to the community? And you're like, awesome. Yeah. So we would go to, whatever, if it's $5,000, 50 people for $100 and ask them and say, hey, a woman in Texas had XYZ happen and she needs some help. Will you help her?
Yeah.
And if you have it on auto setting, it'll automatically help. If you manually do it, then you have to say, yes, I'll help her. Money goes to you. You know how that $5,000 to pay the hospital for that bill.
Wow.
So paying in cash significantly decreases the prices of all of these things.
Right.
Because you rip out the insurance administration, and that totally changes the game.
Right.
Totally changes the game.
And
you don't have $1 million expenses when you're paying in cash. That's a health insurance phenomenon.
Have you had any situations where you can't pay, or what happens if you get cancer or something like that, and now you can't get health insurance because you have a pre-existing condition, which is insane?
Yeah, I mean, we have had, I think, 7 or 8 now cancer cases. We just had a woman last week have a double mastectomy for breast cancer, and that was, I think, $45,000 or $50,000. And so I think we asked, I don't know what it was, 200 people for $250 each. That must have been like 200 couples, $250 per couple, that helped that woman with that mastectomy, and we crowdfunded that in 3 days.
Wow.
So she had $50,000 in her account that she then could pay the hospital with.
Nice to not have to have it hanging over your head either. I mean, from my stomach thing, I'm on a payment plan because I'm like, it cost me thousands of dollars to find out that I had acid reflux.
Yeah, right. And if you were in Crowd Health, that would have been $500.
Yeah.
And our whole philosophy on this is anybody can come up with $500.
Yeah.
If you can figure out how to get $500, right? It's very difficult to come up with $10,000 or $15,000 if you don't have it in your bank account.
Yeah.
Right. And so we want people to be like, hey, go to the hospital if you need to go to the hospital. Get care you need, and don't have to worry about, how much it's going to cost you in deductibles and co-pays and co-insurance and in-network and out-of-network. Focus on your health, right? And that's what people should be focused on.
Yeah.
And so when you say, hey, it's a little bit scary being uninsured, that seems scary to me. I look at it and it's it seems scary to me to be on insurance and being relying upon an organization that is actually your enemy when it comes to getting those bills paid.
No, they are. I mean, they really.
How many times
you have to fight.
We have to go into battle with our health insurance
you do.
company.
You have to go into battle.
Whereas for Crowd Health, we go into battle with you. We're on your side to get these things paid, and we're gonna fight like hell to get these get bills down, get the crowd to help you out. We're all on the same team. And if we don't get one of those bills paid, then what happens?
Right.
People go online, they go on Twitter, they say, at Bridget, can you believe that this guy who was on your, podcast, didn't get this bill paid? That's the worst thing that could happen to us.
Right.
And so we fight like hell to get, these bills paid for you.
Yeah.
And I want an ally on my side because healthcare is complex.
Yeah.
And the great thing too is every time you call into us, you talk to the same person. So you get a care advocate. They are your advocate.
Right.
You can email them, you can text them, you can call them.
Wow.
And it's the same person. So who is, that person's on your team.
Right.
Because I don't want to call into a call center and tell somebody what's going on with me, and then I have to get punted to somebody else, and I have to say it again, and then you're like, for God's sakes, like I just want somebody to walk alongside me in this journey. So we're able to do that too. So a lot of the health insurance crap that you have to deal with, like we just get rid of it.
Wow.
So much better. And we can do it ultimately because we're paying in cash.
And you can go, so if you were going to go see a specialist about something, you would just call, make an appointment, and then find out what their rate is? I mean, how do you even...
Yeah, call and say, hey, I want to schedule an appointment. You go in, you say, hey, I'm paying in cash. What is your cash rate? And the cash rate is typically 30 to 50% less than what your health insurance plan will pay.
Right.
And the reason why is because you're paying at the point of care right then.
Right.
And then in that case, you just submit that bill to us. We'll go out and fund it for you, and then it'll come back to you, right? And a lot of times those specialists, I went to a cardiologist, a few months ago. It was like $145.
And what about like your yearly physical and all your blood work and all that stuff?
That is, fully fundable by the community.
Okay.
So you can submit all that to the community. One wellness visit per year.
Okay.
So and that's OB or GYN, I guess, pediatrics, primary care, vision, or dental.
Okay.
You can do one of those 5 once a year. Submit that to the community, and we'll submit that to the community for funding.
So you can't do like your physical and your GYN?
Most women do from what I've experienced, they'll
do both.
They'll do both.
Oh, right. Okay.
Kind of shot. And so it's, you can do them.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, it is like terrifying to think of, but it sounds so liberating. And I think of, and my husband and I talk about this all the time, if we were to put, let's say we pay probably $1,400 for the family a month, and it's not like I was paying more in California, but it was pretty decent. I could go to Cedar, like I had top level doctors.
Yeah.
It's similar plans. It's just I don't know that the care is as good because it's an HMO and I have to go where at least in California, a choice. So.
And what is your deductible? Do you know?
Oh gosh, like 7,000.
Okay.
Probably.
Yeah, so that's
8,000.
in essence you're paying $1,400, so 14,000, 17,000.
So
plus 7, you're 24 in.
And that's not dental and vision.
Yeah.
So
you're 24 in before the health insurance plan pays $1.
Right. And we say, like, what if we just put $20,000 in an account, and if something happened, we could then just go deal with it.
So your family, it was a family of 4?
3.
3. So your family of 3 with us would be probably around $500 a month, something like that. So $6,000 a year. So you would have an extra, say, almost $20,000.
Yeah.
That you could put into, a bank account and use
for my daughter, or for emergencies, or for the generator that I want to get.
Yeah. So that's where it's like, I don't know why people do have health insurance.
Because in the event of something catastrophic, you're terrified that you have now you're $100,000, $200,000 in, and your family's going to go bankrupt.
But what if you had, almost 10,000 people behind you who would be like, "Hey, I'm willing to help Bridget if she gets in trouble," right? Like that's what Crowd Health provides. Is you got a community of people who are like, "Hey, I'll help Bridget out if she has."
You're gonna end up on GoFundMe anyway. Like that's the irony of with insurance is that you're probably gonna end up setting up a GoFundMe.
Exactly.
Anyway, everyone I know who has insurance, they still end up being like, "Hey, we need this for the extra expenses." Like, why do you have insurance then? You're still gonna go on GoFundMe.
That's what we're asking. Why would you even have insurance?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's something that is so outside of the box. I get that feeling of I'm jumping out of bungee cording or something where you're like, oh, this seems so crazy.
Well, I mean, most of our people are a little bit of a contrarian crew.
Right.
Like they are like, I don't want health insurance dictating what I can or cannot do with my health.
So that's your, so back to that question, who is your kind of, who's your target demo, but who do you see it for really?
Yeah, average age is 34. We have a lot of freelancers.
Okay.
So it's a lot of freelancers, gig workers, creators.
They're being attacked by the Biden administration right now.
Yeah, exactly.
With the freaking independent contractor laws that are insane.
Yeah. So, I mean, those are a big group of our folks. Like they are already entrepreneurial. Their aversion to risk is not probably as high as somebody who would go and get a big corporate job just for security.
Right.
And so they're being like, look, I like what you guys are doing. It is a little bit different, but I'm willing to take the risk to see what happens. And so far, I think we're in 10. I think today was like 10,400 or something like that. 10,400 bills over the last 3 years. Every bill that we've submitted to the community has been crowdfunded.
Wow.
So, and the only ones we don't are like, if you come in, so if you submit a bill and you had just come in and it's for a knee replacement, right? Like you can't just come in and like stick us, the community with a knee replacement. Like you can't do that.
Right.
And so we don't submit all those bills to the community, but that would be the reason why, is you can't just come and stick us with, something.
You're like, I need a knee replacement. I'm going to go join Crowd Health.
Exactly. And so go and, if you go to Crowd Health and reviews on Google, like we've got incredible reviews of like 150 people have, reviewed us.
Do you have to sign like a contract? Is there
it's month to month.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you can come and you can go whenever you want.
Okay.
And so, the only people that we don't take are smokers and people over I think it's 240 or 260. Okay. We do make exceptions for people who have significant muscle mass or really tall. But if you're, obese, that's not, who we're looking for.
Right.
But we've had many people who are like, I really want to be a part of Crowd Health, and they've lost weight and gotten to within range and have joined, which is kind of cool. Like, so there's an incentive to like be healthy within the Crowd Health community. So I think there needs to be incentives for you to be in good health. And if you have personal agency over your own bills, because ultimately our members, they're responsible for their own bills.
Yeah.
We have a community who will help, but you are responsible for your own bills. Once you take personal responsibility, there is a change in behavior that occurs as a result of that.
I want to try it for me, but I don't know that I'm probably the more I am the target demo. And I think waitresses and people like that.
Yeah, totally.
People who it's not even gig workers, people who don't have those safety nets. Do you have to have insurance if you are a business now?
Only if you have more than 50 employees.
Okay. So but that was Obamacare, right? It kind of forced people to.
And we have tons of entrepreneurs.
Individuals don't need to be insured.
Only you don't need to be insured unless you're in 5 states. And if you're in one of those 5 states, then you get
California is one of them. California is one of
them. If you're in one of those 5 states, then you get a fine. But most of our people who live in those states find that the fine is lower than what they're going to actually save, so they still come and join us. So
how much do they get fined?
I don't really I think it's like. In California, it's somewhere between $100 and $200 or something like that.
Seriously, thugs that shake people down for money. It's nuts.
Yeah.
It really is organized crime.
The one state that really is harder is Massachusetts. They've got a crazy healthcare system.
Yeah.
And so they fine you up
But they also have some of the best reciprocity. I do know whatever their craziness is, I know because now my husband's starting to take insurance, and if he gets approved for Blue Cross, in Massachusetts, he's also improved in Massachusetts. Okay. And it's something weird. Mass does have, and I have a sister who lives there, and they did early intervention for one of the kids. He's fine, but they have a lot of outside mental health support for single moms, support for young kids that I don't see in any other state. That's so great. They seem even if it's insane, at least from what I've heard anecdotally from people who live there and deal with it, it does seem to be like amazing.
That's great.
So
it's California, Vermont, Rhode Island, New Jersey.
Oh wow, I didn't know Rhode Island was one.
And Massachusetts are the 5, and then DC is kind of the 6th jurisdiction. So,
Okay.
Yeah, if you're living in one of those, you do get fined, but most of the people still will do it. So all 50 states, Puerto Rico.
Yeah, I want to see, like, my husband's more risk averse in general, but I'm like, maybe I go off the insurance and he stays insured with the child, and I just try it. We see that.
Try it out.
I do the single plan.
Yeah.
And see how it goes.
We got a lot of folks who are very well known who are trying us out. So
yeah,
it's fun to see.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Some people who have really spoken up in the pandemic. We have a very libertarian leaning crew. So a lot of the libertarian thought leaders are actually members of Crowd Health. So it's kind of fun to see the people who are helping other people, with
do you see it as something that could disrupt the industry if it really took off?
I totally do.
Yeah.
I totally do. Yeah, I mean, almost every component of what we do does it better than health insurance does.
Right.
So, I hope it can disrupt. I mean, we definitely can get to millions of people using this.
Yeah, you do.
Tens or hundreds of millions. I don't know. We're going to go international next year too, so there's an international component that can happen. There's a lot of cool things that we can do going forward, because a lot of people in other countries are saddled with really piss poor healthcare too.
Yeah.
Canada has a socialized, healthcare system, but they have to wait forever.
My friend's from UK. She just moved to the States, and she's like, I almost died waiting to get something in my ovaries checked, and like, so even though it's like, oh, this great socialized medicine, I still hear kind of horror stories and long waits. And
yeah, totally. And so could you, in Canada, instead of waiting in Canada,
just go to a doctor,
use Crowd Health, and actually, come to the United States to go and get your knee done or whatever. And so it's kind of on top of your socialized, medicine. It'll be the monthly rate will probably be lower because you will only need it for, a limited number of things.
Could you just go to a doctor in those countries, or would you have to come to the States?
No, what I was saying is, like, you could go to a doctor in that country, but if there was a situation where you needed something done and it was, 6 months from now, right? You could actually use Crowd Health, come to the United States, get really good doctors. The United States still has the best doctors in the world.
I know it does. Yeah, I mean, people come here from all over the world.
Exactly. And so you could come to the United States, and it wouldn't be that full price. It would just be, a fraction of that. But people could come to the United States and get their knee done or hip replaced or whatever, which U.S. doctors are awesome at that kind of stuff.
Amazing at. I mean, it is like when you talk about hip replacement, some of the stuff that it's crazy how that's just a routine.
Yeah.
A whole hip.
And if you have cancer or whatever, you want to be in the United States. Like any of those complex conditions, you do not want to be in a socialist country for those, right? Like, you want access to U.S. doctors.
Yeah.
And so it would be people be willing to pay something, a portion of what our full Crowd Health members pay to have access to something like that in neighboring countries like Canada, Mexico, Central America, things like that. Expats is something we're going to do too.
Oh, so, that's interesting.
There's other ways that we're going to be, expanding over the next year.
It's really exciting.
Yeah.
I think that it, in this conversation, just observing my own, not resistance, it's fear. It is like you said, this psyop of like, you have to have health insurance, you have to have health insurance, you have to have health insurance, or like your family will go bankrupt and everyone will die. And that has been drilled into me. So when you're like, oh, it feels like you're jumping out of a plane without a parachute. That's just the feeling you get. And
I totally get it. And that is our number one barrier to getting people signed up.
Yeah.
Is that feeling. And back to kind of what we, talked about earlier, is like, let's evaluate the emotional responses that we have to things and really kind of logically get at it. Like, I think health insurance actually is riskier than Crowd Health from my perspective. It's putting a lot more people into bankruptcy. It's costing a lot more people a lot of heartache and financial damage.
The time.
Time
is the thing too. The time you never get back, dealing with this, waiting on hold, trying to get answers, being shuffled around the system. I mean, it is not fun.
Eventually what's going to happen are, people who, like you and some other, are going to come out and say, I've been doing crowd health and it works great.
Yeah.
And like, y'all should try it.
Yeah.
And so I think that people, this will ultimately start snowballing, and people will be like, oh, you have crowd health? Even in the last 6 months, 15% of our new customers in the summertime were from existing customers, referrals from existing customers, 15%. Now it's about between 35 and 40%.
Wow, okay.
And so even in the last 6 months, our members are telling other people, like, you got to do this. Like, I've tried it. I've been a member for a year or 2 years or 3 years or whatever it's been.
Yeah.
And so we're starting to see it.
Even like the enrollment periods and all this stuff. It's like, what? If you miss it, you got to go find insurance to cover. It's so crazy.
You have to go get your W-2 forms, and you have to fill those out, and you got to submit those. So the government now, it's like, no. You go to Crowd Health, if you're a single person, it takes you 5 to 7 minutes.
Wow.
If you have a family, it might take you 10, because you got to fill in your
Yeah, this
kids'
seems like
information.
something that would be so great for anyone I know they raised very conveniently the age to like 26 that you can be on your parents' plan, but anyone really after you're 26, unless you have, and do you take people with pre-existing conditions or no?
Yeah, if you have a pre-existing condition, you can join. Like I said, though, it's like, if you have a pre-existing condition and want to just drop something on us, like from the get-go, like, you got to be with us for a period of time before some of those things, are submittable.
Right.
So, we have that outlined, but it's logical.
Right.
You can't
it would be unfair.
Take care of yourself and then expect somebody else to pay for it right away.
Right.
So yeah, it's we have tons of people, not tons, but tons of people with pre-existing conditions.
Right.
We have a handful of people who have type 1 diabetes, like that. They do really well within the Crowd Health platform. So
it seems like for somebody like myself who was literally paying hundreds of dollars every month to just be healthy for most of my because I was never on my parents' plan, so I think most of my 20s, all of my 30s, I think I used it. God, I got bit by a dog. That's what the scar is from. I got bit by a dog, and these dogs were fighting, and it took me 3 years to pay it off, and I had insurance.
Perfect example.
3 years, and I was paying $450 a month in insurance, and then I got a $15,000 bill, and I had to just make payments.
Yeah. The other thing people don't
I was
understand
like 30,
you can negotiate that.
7.
You can negotiate that.
Yeah.
You negotiate that down. So that's what we do, is we negotiate that down.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I don't think there's any member, to my knowledge, there's no member on Crowd Health that's on a payment plan right now. Like, and we've had, like I said, over 7,000 people have signed up.
Wow.
And we started in 2021. So I don't think anybody's, from our knowledge, has been on a payment plan at all over that.
That's really cool.
So,
what's your biggest defect of character?
My biggest defect of character. Wow, that's a really good one. I'll tell you what that is, and it's actually been something I've been thinking about lately. Self-control is, when it comes to food, is one of my defect of character.
It's hard.
It's hard.
It's really hard.
It's hard.
Yeah.
And I've gotten to a place in life, I'm in my mid-40s, I am for the most part keto, which is basically a very low carb type thing. But I found myself, when I'm in a stressful situation, my go-to is
pizza.
Like something carby.
Yeah.
And that, I know what happens to me is I don't sleep well that night, and it ruins my next day, and it cascades. And I know it. I know it happens. But you know what I do? I still do it.
Yeah.
And it's self-control.
Interesting.
With food is one of my big character defects.
Yeah.
Right? Especially right now, I've been struggling with it.
Well, it's cold.
It's cold.
Yeah. Your body wants comfort food.
And
I've started baking bread because I was like obsessed with learning it during the pandemic, and then I just picked it back up again, and I made the best it's actually like really, I'm starting to really get the hang of it, and it does feel like such a great, but my husband's like, you've got to stop making bread. I'm just crushing like loaves of bread every day, Bridget. I can't do this.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's that weird balance of like, I want to learn this skill, but I don't know if we should be like crushing a loaf of bread every day. Although it does feel better than other bread.
Yeah.
Like, at least I can kind of like, I'm like, I don't feel as crappy when I make it.
Yeah.
But
well, I have a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old, and so every morning I ask them. There's something in kind of a biblical context of fruits of the Spirit, which is being love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, kindness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. Those are the 9. And so every morning we say, hey, let's talk about those and which one are we going to try to do well at.
That's
today?
really cool.
And sometimes we feel like, hey, we need to be more patient today.
Yeah.
Like we just had, with the 5 and a 7-year-old, they're girls. Like,
yeah.
I just need to be more patient today, And so you check up with me at dinner tonight, and to ask me, as your dad, you can ask me, how have you done, Dad? Have you been patient today? Have you been self-controlled today? And that's just a rhythm that we have in our house. And it actually works really well. It's
That's
good
really
that
cool.
My 5 and 7-year-old hold me accountable. I hold them accountable, and that creates intimacy within our family. But it is a rhythm almost every single day.
That's really cool. What's your biggest asset?
I can come up with really interesting solutions to very complex problems. I'm not the smartest human being in the world, but I tend to be able to really isolate what can solve a very complex problem. I have taken on health insurance.
Yeah.
Right. It is a very complex problem.
It is.
And we have, I think, solved it with a very simple solution. It's first principle type stuff.
Yeah, and it goes back to community.
Yeah.
That even if it's a globally local community, it is that sense of local community of people who are helping one another.
Yeah.
Of their own volition, not like, oh, I'm just paying into this system so the sick people can take advantage of it.
Yeah. I mean, I think we all operate on this emotion logic continuum, and some of us fall on kind of the emotional, respond emotionally, and some of us fall on the logical side and respond logical. And I think I do a pretty good job of kind of like sticking in the middle where my wife laughs at me because I cry at movies all the time. But if you give me a very analytical situation, I can move to the right and be like extremely logical and analytical about something. And so that ability to kind of flex back and forth is a skill set that I think is worthwhile.
Yeah, that's something I really actually admire about my husband as well. He's similar in that sense where that guy is a planner. I feel like he should have been in the military or something. He's so organized and just has amazing executive functioning, and will tweak out on like getting prepared for a trip or something and solving problems and making everything in the house very streamlined, but will cry watching Band of Brothers.
Yeah, totally. I cry at American Idol. I mean, it's like ridiculous. Like my wife is like, really? This is American Idol, dude. Seriously? I'm like, it's really touching.
I cried on the way to this. I got emotional on the way to this interview. I was listening to Graceland, which I don't know why I'll get obsessed with an album that I loved even as like, and I grew up listening to that. My mom loved it.
Yeah.
And then it's the 25th anniversary of the album, and it just was on, and I didn't know that there was a track where Paul Simon talks about writing Graceland, and he was taking it piece by piece and talking about the different influences and the different people and the collaboration, and I was moved to tears. I'm like, why am I crying right now?
I love it.
It was so beautiful, just the way he broke it all down and all of these different. I don't know why it moved me so much, but I was like, I'm 35 surrounded by these like semis crying, listening to Paul Simon. I don't know, maybe it just brought me back to, I'm like, this is so beautiful. I want to make beautiful things. I want to inspire people to make beautiful things. It feels like, I don't know. There was something, just the way he was talking about the music and the musicians and being in South Africa and how it was really just, I don't know, it really is the best.
Yeah, I love that.
Well, thank you. This has been amazing. I could talk to you forever. I hope that, crowd health kind of takes off and people can get over that knee jerk. I'm going to have to try it. I'm going to have to figure out how to do this for myself.
Come try it.
Yeah.
And let your audience know what you think.
Yeah.
But if anybody in your audience wants to join, Bridget is our little promo code.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
I have a promo code.
And it's just $99 for the first 3 months. And so even if you have health insurance and you want to come and just like check it out, it's $99. I mean, it's less than your cell phone. Come join us and check it out. If you like it, stick around. If you don't, then you don't. That's fine too. So we'd love for folks to come and give us a try. Yeah. Joincrowdhealth.com is the website.
Okay. Awesome. Well, where can we find you?
Twitter, I'm most active. It's a Join Crowd Health on Twitter, or Schoonover. It's hard to spell, Andy.
Okay. We'll put it in the description.
The notes. And Instagram are the same handle. So
awesome.
Those are the two places that I hang out most.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Hold on to your jingle bells. Pluto TV has all your holiday favorites for free. Enjoy our season's greetings category with 9 holiday channels, including holiday movie favorites by Lifetime, Festive Fireplace, Holiday Lights, and Hallmark movies and more. Download the Pluto TV app on all your favorite devices and start streaming holiday favorites on live channels and on demand. With thousands of free movies and TV shows, Pluto TV is your home for the holidays. Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.
It's time for the weekly check-in with Bridget and Cousin Maggie. My podcasts often stay with me, some more than others. This interview I did with Andy, he sponsors our other podcast, Dumpster Fire. I met him at an event and we were talking. It was a Bitcoin event. And I got to interview him very briefly. I was kind of doing this speed interviewing, which that series will be launching soon as well. And it was just really interesting hearing his perspective on health care and health insurance coming from the industry. And so I wanted to have a longer conversation with him about all the things. And it really, ever since I talked to him, I really have been asking myself why I have health insurance and if I really need it, and what this feeling that comes up when I think about doing something like crowd health, when that fear of God that's been instilled in me without health insurance comes up. And I don't know if it's, irresponsible of me to just kind of jump out of that plane without a parachuteless is the only way I can think to describe it, the feeling, even though I'm failing to articulate it even right now. And I thought that I would, I told Jaron, my husband, about it after the interview that day. And he was like, I thought he's way more risk averse than me. And I thought he for sure would be like, absolutely not. And he said, hell yeah, let's do it. So now we're really going to consider it, and he wants to talk to him, and I'm really interested in it. I'm fascinated with the idea of disruption in general and disrupting the health care industry. Health insurance industry seems to be something that is so necessary, and I'm not sure how you would do it other than to just start doing it. So this was one of those podcast interviews I did that really stuck with me because it's so outside of the box and so different. And I wonder, it requires like almost an entirely new way of looking at the world in order for me to conceive of how this would be liberating. And even from a financial perspective, how it would be actually probably beneficial. So I don't know. I'll keep you posted. It's just fascinating. There's so many people out there doing such cool, interesting things. And all we hear about is this culture war stuff. It was weird week for the culture war. We will be probably off dumpster fire one more week this week because I'm going up to Dallas today. And I'm going to do a bunch of shows at the Blaze, mostly going up for Normal World, the brother show to Dumpster Fire. And that will be a fun one. And Normal World is, a lot, and it's got a similar vibe and covers similar stuff to Dumpster Fire. I feel delirious right now. The child didn't sleep. So I am delirious. And I hope you're all doing great. Maggie is moving, and so we're just all getting settled again. And then we will rise like phoenixes out of the ashes of California. Tune in next week for another riveting episode that will change your life, help you get out of your own way, and solve all the world's problems. I want to thank our composer, Jared Elias, my co-producer and cousin, Maggie, and all of you out there listening. This has been Walk-Ins Welcome with Bridget Phetasy. I'm Bridget Phetasy, and you're welcome. It's the dumbest line.